Welcome back to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today's episode is going to be episode 6, and this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one because those of you who watched episode 5, you may be aware that Dave talked a lot about him, and we didn't really cover a lot about me and what I do and what we wanted for the podcast and I wanted for the podcast, and he also, talked about this in a moment, but also, behind the scenes as well. He also wanted to make sure that, we were able to talk about what I do and how that's variable as well. So today's episode, it's going to be an interesting one, and one that I think is going to be interesting because I'm actually going to be the one being interviewed, and Dave is going to be running that interview. So I'll let Dave explain a little bit more in that cut-in interview now, but do enjoy this video and do enjoy this podcast, and I hope you take some value from it. And if you have any suggestions of anyone that you would like to see on the podcast or any topics you would like me to discuss, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'd really appreciate a subscribe as well, because it really helps the channel grow, and these podcasts are taking quite a bit of time to put together. But I'm going to stop raffling on. I'm going to let Dave take over, and I'll see you at the very end or in another episode. So enjoy the interview, and I'll see you very soon.
Hello people, I am David Watson of Next Level Coach, and today I am hijacking Carlton's podcast and that's Carlton at Brunton Media. And the reason that I've hijacked his podcast, with his permission I must add, is because last week he was good enough to do a podcast with me, and we really got into the depths of coaching, and I think there's possibly about an hour where I don't shut up. But people don't actually understand how Carlton and I met and how Carlton started his business up. And I then suggested to Carlton that I actually thought that would be a really good premise for a podcast itself, because of the advice and content delivery that Carlton has given to me. So that's why today I've hijacked his podcast, and he is on the receiving end of the questions. I hope you all enjoy this. It's going to be fun. Hello, Carlton.
Hello, how are you doing today? This is a new experience for me. I get to sit back and sort of relax a little bit, because normally I'm right. Which question's next? Right, I got to really think critically about how I'm gonna go about this interview. But today I can just chill and just talk, which I'm good at. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting for me, and I don't want to. I want to ask rather than tell. But could you just explain the process you went through as to how we met?
Sure. So I've talked about the strategy a little bit in other content, but I'll briefly go over it for those who don't know. It's a strategy which I sort of hijacked from Gary Vaynerchuk eventually, and then I sort of adapted it to my own means and my own style. So you start by going onto a location tag that you care about. So in my case, Salisbury. And you just go and look and see what content's being created. So that could be anything from video stuff to photo stuff to, podcast stuff like this. And then I saw that you were posting some, I think it was coaching stuff a while ago. And so I reached out saying, I really love the content, blah, 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 blah. Just adding value in your comment section for a while. I think it was like 5 posts, 6 posts, 7 posts. Yeah. I think I did this on the train to London, I think, if I remember correctly. And then I eventually reached out to you and said, yo, love what you do. It'd be great to just grab a coffee whenever you're free. Obviously before lockdown and COVID and all of that fun. But yeah, it'd be good to grab a coffee, see who you are, see what you do, see if there's possible value that I can add to you and possible vice versa as well in that respect. So that's kind of how the initial meet was, and then we got coffee, and then we had a chat about lots of things, and then I think the following week or the week after that we got coffee again, and then so on and so on and so on. Yeah. And then eventually the relationship built to where it is now, which is talking quite regularly and helping each other out with content and advice and different perspectives on life issues. I think is where we've kind of where we've weirdly gone.
It's definitely gone down some strange roads. But one of the things, just for the benefit of people that listen, I think this is really beneficial for any business, because it really highlighted to me areas I needed to explore. And as it turned out, I'll wait until you finish explaining to people, but it wasn't an approach that worked great for me. But the fact I became aware of it has meant it opened up other avenues that I needed to be aware of. So could you just explain to people a little bit more what you mean about the location tagging, and just to give people some background to this? This is when Carlton has either free time or is on a train.
Mhm.
Could you now just explain to people what
Yeah,
you
of
do on
course.
Instagram and why you do it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, like I always try and optimize my time as much as I can. So in the respect to in the normal world, when I'm commuting to see a client, see a meeting, um, go to do whatever I'm going to do that day. So if I have like an hour to kill on a train, or an hour and a half to kill, or I'm waiting for a bus, or whatever it is I'm doing, I always try to find ways where I can do things which will benefit the business long term, short term, or somewhere in between. And the strategy which I've found that has worked pretty well, it's kind of hit or miss depending on like what's being posted on the location tag specifically, and what kind of like niches are around on the day. But overall, the concept of adding value is something which I've sort of ran as a motto through my business very, very early on. And it's one of the main reasons why I think I've had the success I've had, is because I don't necessarily just look at how much money can I make from this engagement, or this agreement, or this project. How much value can I add to their business, which in turn means how much value can I add to my own. So the location tab specifically, I think that if you have a good foothold in the respect to where you are locally. So in my case, Salisbury, the majority of people who post regularly in the Salisbury location, they know of my name. They know of Brunton Media. They know of, in some ways, they'll know of what I do just passively, because of some of the other strategies that I do alongside it. Because I think if you're going to add value in comment sections, you should also be creating story content, because the majority of people, they won't necessarily straight go to your account. They'll check your story if you have a story first. And I've found that story content for me is very easy to create, because it's just me documenting what I'm doing anyway. But it also gives kind of an interesting insight into, okay, this is what today was, because there's sometimes a lot of lag between me filming something and then it actually going live. Just because of like just the way video production and any production is. You have to make sure it's right, you have to edit it, and then you have to make sure it gets approved, and etc. So I think stories will give a lot of live interaction and sort of raw interaction. And I think that really helps when you are diving into people's comment sections as well. And it's not like I'm jumping into people's comment section going, oh, I've got this really cool stuff going on with me. Oh, it'd be really cool if you could follow me. I'll follow you back and all this, because I think that will develop in some ways, and I can talk about this more if you want, but I think that would eventually develop in quote unquote fake subs, or fake followers, depending on what platform you're talking about. But what I found works is just being genuine. So if you really like an image, then say why you really like it. And if you think you really like an image and it has premise, but you think there's could be stuff that could be better about it, then say that. Some people take it as, oh my god, how dare you? But mostly people are like, I didn't think about that. That's a really cool idea. I'm going to try that. Or, oh, cool, that's a really cool editing style. Oh, cool, I thought maybe that was a bit too over edited. Now I look back at it, or etc. Depending on what it is and where it is.
So just to clarify, you literally, and this is from the perspective of digital media and filming, you will go onto the location. And I remember you saying to me once about you're on your way to London, so you go onto a location in London, and you see what people are posting, and from your perspective, you then, as somebody that creates digital media content, you then comment on why you like their post, as opposed to just great post, that looks brilliant. You actually explain, which is the more difficult concept I think for people to understand, is because you go into that kind of the next level, of actually, this is why I like your post. And you kind of, and I remember with me, when you did that with me, you were like, oh, I like that idea, but what about this? Or I like that idea, or I hadn't thought about that. And you did by talking to me, you created that dialogue. Where did you learn that process, and how? Just sorry to cut you off before you got a chance to answer. Because this is, I think, really important for people who are trying to start up their own businesses. Like, how did you learn that, and why is that important?
I mean, for me, I just the like comment sections and a lot of what I do is just a longer winded or a way round, specifically me having a conversation with someone, right? That I may not
Yeah,
necessarily know, but it's through their content, right? So if I can genuinely, like, I will only comment on stuff I can genuinely comment on, right? I've talked about before, like, I don't just go down and like stuff because I don't think that's necessarily healthy for the ecosystem of the platform. And also it's not very helpful for the creator because it's like, oh, cool, they double tapped it, great, right? Like, from my perspective, as a creator, I know if someone just goes down and likes it, that's great to see, but it isn't as helpful as if someone writes me a comment saying, I really loved this, I really loved Y, have you thought about doing this, etc. And I think for me, the main reason why I did it, or how I learned from it, was just simply, like, those who don't know, my background's been in game development and doing gaming content for a while, and a lot of that, you're in a situation where you may be trying to do something in the game that you need other players to do. So normally you use voice chat and you're kind of thrown in the deep end in the respect to meeting new people, talking to new people in that respect. So I didn't for a long time have very extroverted skills in the respect to how can I have a conversation with new people? How can I go about doing that? But eventually, through years of doing it through gaming, I just developed those skills, and I was like, well, okay, let's see if it works. I tried it with a couple of things, and then I only specifically choose people who I think I can help in the respect to, I look at my skill set and I go, right, okay, where are they in their career? Where are they with their content? Do I think they have potential, but they're going on a path that they may not see as necessarily not very beneficial, like when we first met, for example. And but it's not just, I'm just going to point the finger and go, oh well, that's wrong. I'm going to say, look, this is why it's wrong, but here's a suggestion on how you can start phasing that away and replace it with something else that is more beneficial for what you're trying to do, which is after normally a conversation of what do you want to do, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
what
Because I remember you specifically pointed out to me that although I was getting a lot of likes on posts, none of the posts were actually mine. I was doing a lot of resharing, and actually, you were the one that sort of highlighted to me I needed to do more original content, and there was a very long discussion about that. And although it probably, how can I put it, hasn't got me as many followers as the ego would like, the followers I got are genuine. They
oh
actually
it,
like
it
my
it
content,
is so slow. It is painfully slow to
but
grow an
the
account this way.
interaction is higher.
But when you get to when you get to 500, when you get to 10,000, whatever your
Mm.
metric is or whatever level you are in your following, like the majority of those followers are genuine people who genuinely enjoy your content and will genuinely comment, like, share, give you feedback, talk, have a conversation with you, etc., all around your content. And I talk about this quite a lot, but creating community around the content you produce is one of the best things you can do, because it should be like, oh, this person because of what they do, right? But you also need to go and support them in what they do as well. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah. But that's
But
like what you and I are doing now.
yeah, totally.
You invited me onto your podcast, and then I was like, I want to interview you on your own podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, I can give a little bit of background about why. Completely selfishly, I needed content, or I wanted content.
But that's adapting to the current climate, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, true. But it was also, I think, that your perspective on certain things, and especially what we did talk about in that episode, I think can be very valuable to some of my community, in the respect to the community of people who I talk to and consume my content. Mainly because I think a lot of them, well, some of them, I should say anyway, are in between about going full time in the respect to with what they do, or they're not 100% sure about, especially now, what their future's going to be in that respect. And for me, it's been like, no, I have no idea, but I've kind of developed the skill set to be like, that's okay. I don't really mind, because in most cases when I run into a problem, I'm like, right, okay, how can I fix it? Or how can I get around it? How can I get over it? That kind of thing. It's never really been like, oh, there's this problem. Oh, okay, well, there you go. Have fun, game over, you know? In that respect. So I think there was a lot. I think there was a lot of value in that podcast, and I think it was a very interesting conversation. And for me, I'm always trying to put myself in situations or create content that is valuable to other people in one way or another. Some of the time, it's valuable in different ways than I originally expect, which is interesting as well. But I
In
think,
what way? Can you give an example of that?
yeah, of course. I mean, I was expecting, for example, us to talk about similar to what we're now talking about in our previous
Yeah.
podcast. We ended up going slightly off tangent a little bit, which was fine, and that's why I let it sort of go off that way, because I think there was a lot of value in that conversation. But I think it was more psychological discussion instead of necessarily business, and it was more like the psychological aspects of quote unquote being successful, or becoming successful or whatever,
Yeah,
than
it very much turned into a podcast about the coaching and what it is I do and how I do it, and the meanings behind things and why we behave the way we do. Hence,
which I think was a different perspective, because a lot of the podcasts which by the time you've seen this will be coming or will have come, are with business people, are very, okay, here's the knit and grit of how this person built their business, right?
Yeah.
Here is what they do, why they do it, how they do it, right? This is where they want to go, this is how they're going to go there, and this is what they're doing now to put them in that position moving forward. And then it's me bouncing off, my opinions on the same thing and where I think they may be necessarily either doing it really well or doing it badly or could be doing it better, depending on where on that scale they are.
So when you so you've been doing before this lockdown, you were starting to get into a lot of the businesses in Salisbury. To try and sort of, what is it you see a lot of them doing right?
That's an interesting question. I mean, a lot of them are slowly starting to, I use the term, turn on to the idea of creating content, right? Which
Yeah.
is great to see. It's been interesting because across, I would say, probably a year, of me sort of doing what I do, so whether that's creating content for myself, creating content for other clients, and etc., there's been sort of this weird shift I've seen, like people who I've sort of known about and they've sort of known me. Like, we haven't actually had like an official meet, so to speak, but
Yeah.
we've known of each other because Salisbury is small. Everyone knows everyone. You don't really operate in Salisbury very long until you find out, oh, this person's related to this person, they are married to this
Yeah.
person, etc. In that respect. So I think that it's been very interesting to see sort of, there's now, I think, 2 or 3 kind of different styles of businesses or business people. People who are open to the concept of understanding why social media is important, and they're open to have a conversation. That was how a lot of them started. That's 1. 2, people who already understand why video is important. They're the easiest ones for me, because I don't have to do a this is why it's beneficial, blah 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 spiel, because they already understand it, they already get it. Then it's more, let's talk about the creative process. Let's talk about how we actually tailor it around what you do. How do we tailor it around what you do, and how do we optimize it for video, and what could we do, and what do we think is going to get traction in that respect, and we really go analytically more so. And then there's, unfortunately, I think, businesses that are in some ways more structured around, they have an inherent interest to keep quote unquote old media alive, so they are less likely to want to invest in video because they are concerned that it may overshadow what they are, quote unquote, trying to sell for advertising space or advertising in that respect. Now, Nothing wrong with that, and I completely understand that, and I think there is always going to be a place for stuff like this, and also printed media, billboards, and etc. And there always is, but I think that if a business wants to stand out nowadays, they have to do those plus social media stuff, plus content creation, plus this, plus that. If you're gonna, because some people say, oh, if I have to choose, I would always choose social media stuff because it's more personalized. It's more, I would say, more longevity wise, right? You only have a spot in a newspaper for that week. You only have a spot on a radio for the time that you pay for. You only have that billboard for a couple of weeks. If you invest in video content, especially organic content creation, it will sit online until you delete it or until the internet ceases to exist. So it's money which you put in that you will then continually after a while get money back from. So for me, from a business perspective, that sounds more or more beneficial from a return on investment standpoint than any other form of advertising that I know of.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, in terms of, because one of the things, you said newspaper and billboard, and I actually, to be frank, don't know how much the advertising of those costs or what impact they have. But in terms of, like, if you have a billboard by Castle Street roundabout, say, that's a lot of traffic. Now, whether anyone is actually going to buy anything off because they've seen the billboard, I don't know.
I think it goes down to the respect of, like, it's consistent messaging across the advertising channels that you're doing, right? So a lot of the work I do is with campaigns. So you might have a billboard that had a specific message that pushes you to something, right? But you also might have seen a piece of video content that we did to promote what you're also promoting. Then you also probably saw a new, like, advertising is not just one piece of advertising will necessarily sell. In some cases that's true, but it's very unlikely. What the majority of it is not pressure selling. A lot of what I do is brand awareness selling, which is basically, here, let me introduce what this person does in a shiny way, and then they, through either doing more content that you'll then see, because you'll be like, oh, cool, that's a cool video, I like their page, oh, cool, they're posting more, oh, cool, I get to know more about them, I get to know their business, get to know what they do more. And then when they come to mind to think, oh, I need XYZ, whatever that may be, then they're forefront in that person's mind. But it also goes hand in hand with, if you're going to do a larger campaign where you have billboard messaging, you have newspaper advertising, you have radio advertising, you have video advertising, I think that they can all work hand in hand as long as the messaging is cohesive and as long as you have someone, not necessarily me, but managing that campaign specifically, whether that's you, whether that's a different marketing agency, me, etc., on how to do that. Because if the message is cohesive and they work together, then you'll see a better result. Now, what I see sometimes with some businesses is they go, right, we need to do advertising, we need to do marketing. Right, let's buy a billboard, let's do this, and they just go, we're going to put all this messaging over here, all this messaging over here, all this messaging over here, but it's all slightly different messaging, or it's all just, come on buy, come on buy, come on buy, come on buy. It's not, here's why, here's what value could be made, here's why we're special, here's our ISP, here's this, here's that. It's constantly, they're thinking about, how do we make money directly? And a lot of advertising I found that actually really, really works is more suggestive and more like less pushy, if that makes sense. In the respect to, let me introduce you to a brand or business, let me introduce you to someone who does a certain thing that you may or may not want in the future, and then when it comes around to you wanting that, hopefully you'll be, or like, for example, if you know someone who happens to want video, hopefully I will be the person who would be forefront in your mind that does video. So you're more likely to suggest me than someone else who hasn't really put out any advertising or hasn't really put out any content. What I do for my advertising is very different to others, right? What I do is a lot of organic stuff, which is a lot harder work, but is also, from a long-term perspective, I think very, very beneficial, because all the work I'm putting in today will serve me for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. As I
Yeah.
said previously.
So if there's a business sat at home right now and they're in lockdown, but they're still doing online sales or they're servicing and stuff, and even actually after lockdown, what platforms first? I've got two questions, but what platforms would you first suggest people should make content for?
Mhm. I mean, the what platforms question is always an interesting one because it depends on a lot of things. Um, okay, what target audience are you looking to attract first? Would be my first question. Like the problem with advertising and the problem with doing it, I would say properly, is there's a lot of you've asked me a question, I'm going to ask you a question. You're then going to ask me a question. I'm then going to answer that question with another question, and then we'll get the answer. It's
I just
never it's never
Sorry,
just like
just to
go on. No, go
no,
on.
but just to clarify, if somebody's sat at home now, or they're working from home, or they're still able to run their business online, right? But they're not on any social media platforms. We're not talking about advertising, just the foundation for how do I get a presence online? And you're the same. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and I'm also on TikTok. Now, my reasons for that is that 1 minute clip that I post up every day for coaching can be seen is suitable for all of those platforms. It's not the best clip for Facebook, it's not the best clip for LinkedIn, but in terms of return on my time investment, I just film that once and that same clip can be put on 6 platforms, right? If you're at home, and obviously I have the luxury of I enjoy doing that, but all I'm talking about, like the very first baby steps, the incremental steps of where would you say, right, you just want to make a Facebook page? Would you say you just need to sign up to Instagram and start not a business page, just a page that your business is called, but you don't actually have to do Instagram business?
I mean, that's an interesting that's an interesting perspective, but like from my perspective, I would say the first step is always create all of the entities on all of the platforms. That's
Right.
the
So
first step,
you would say try and get across all the
right?
platforms.
So step one, create like I have Brunton Media on TikTok, for example. Don't use
Yeah.
it, but it exists. Um, create a LinkedIn, create a Twitter, and these are like branded to your business, not necessarily you. They can be,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
specifically to the
Yeah. No,
business,
I'm
right?
saying branded for the business. Yeah.
Then create an Instagram, then to create a Facebook, because then like through business in general, no matter how long you've been around, you'll know roughly what your target audience is, right?
Yeah.
And then you can say, well, okay, so I want to start delving into content. Okay, first thing I would say, depending on what you do, I would say just start doing stories on Instagram. Just start with one step, right? So
Yeah.
start something easy. Start doing small videos on Instagram, small videos on Facebook, little pictures here or there. Oh, by the
And
way, I also
this is
have a
just using
website.
your phone. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah,
using
yeah,
your phone. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's just about the concept of starting that ball rolling.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I think you'll find, especially now, they had a website, they've relaunched the website, but they probably didn't say enough about it when they relaunched it. So not a lot of people actually know they have a website. One,
Yeah.
and two, not a lot of people necessarily know what they can buy slash see slash consume on that website,
Right.
as well. Why like website? I can get this again. It goes quickly in depth, but like
Yeah.
just as a base level to answer your question more directly. From my perspective, I think you should be trying to build a more personal like
Yeah. I mean, the
relationship
reason
with your customer base.
the reason for my question is that, as you know, you know some of my background, so you know that the year you and I met in January, you know the year before, I'd been doing a lot of social media, and was kind of to a degree very self-taught, um, and the learning curve can be quite steep. Um, and then you and I, when we met, because you reached out, we then started talking about different strategies and how to implement different things. And there was this learning curve. There's like you and I have discussed the fact that because I'm a life coach, and because I only talk about my coaching, I can get away with just turning the phone on and filming myself sweating. As long as I have some word of wisdoms to pass or something productive to say, I get
Because
away with that.
because your ISP is what you say, not necessarily how it looks
Exactly
or how
that.
it sounds. It's the
Yeah.
information which is coming out of your mouth, and the same would be true of anything that comes out of my mouth. But you expect it to sound or look better because of what I'm quote unquote selling.
Yeah. And this is where you and I got into the difference between feeds and stories, because you're very good at walking through Salisbury, talking about the meetings you're going to and what you're doing, which is great for your stories. But if you're going to put something on your feed, it actually has to represent the quality of the brand. Whereas I'm really fortunate as a life coach that I can just post up a sweaty video off my phone and nobody expects it to be any different. But it makes it harder for me to reach out and create a community, because nobody is on those platforms saying, "Hi, I'm sitting here wanting a life coach." Whereas you're able to see that people are trying to do content, and that gives you, like I did, like I was doing, and that gives you the opportunity to say, "Hi, I really liked what you did. Have you thought?" And then 3 conversations down the line, do you fancy meeting up for a coffee to discuss this further? So 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 just for some, like I said, for people who are trying to work out how to get onto digital media, so that they've got their phone, they're on the platforms. I'm just putting it out there because I don't know what everybody needs. But say somebody has a shop, it does online, it's doing fine, but they could do more business. What would you suggest they film or take pictures of in that shop, just to get the ball rolling, so they can start on the learning curve of like the level they need to get to, so that when they actually say, "I now want to move up a level," and contact you, what would be good for them to have already been doing and learning?
I mean, from my perspective, like the first thing that jumps to mind was some advice I've been giving clients to how do they start using stories, right? The same, you can follow this same logic with creating basic content, or I'm going to film myself talking about X, Y, and Z on my phone content.
Yeah.
But it's basically something very simple. I just said to clients, because I was like, oh, I don't know what I would talk about in stories, etc. I said, okay, every day when you walk to work, or you start to work, or you are beginning to work, say good morning.
Yeah, I remember you
That's
telling
it.
me that. Yeah.
That's it. Take a photo, write good morning on it, post it. Do that every day for 3 weeks, and I bet you'll start having more ideas on, oh, I could share this. Oh, this would be good for stories. Oh, this would, and then in that process, what you're doing is you will eventually get ideas to create more longer form content that you can then
Yeah.
turn into. I'm going to test it by doing a 15-second video on my story. If it gets good interaction, I'll then go in more depth talking about it in a video. Or the other way around. Oh, I've just posted a video like you've done before. Just posted a video talking about X. Here's my thoughts on why X is important, right?
Yeah.
On
I
stories,
do that a lot, yeah.
And what you do by that is it's again adding more value. Right,
Yeah.
like I come back to this point all the time, but it's mainly just simply because, in my perspective, it's the main important growth factor. If you add more value than your competition, you'll grow faster.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
That makes sense.
If because a lot of people have said to me, "You're so much more than a videographer." But what do I actually charge for? What do I actually sell? In most
Yeah.
cases, it's me creating some content for you.
Okay.
That's what I sell, right? That's my product or my service, and everything else is just supporting that piece, right? Because from my perspective, I it's part of my job to help you understand why it would be a good idea, right? Or why it would be beneficial for your business and your bottom line
Yeah.
in the long
Yeah.
term to do it. Because then if you see a continued turn on investment on it, you're more likely to spend more money annually on it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That's the way I've looked at it for the years I've been doing it, and it seems to be working in that respect as well. It's not necessarily, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily the medium is wrong. It might be your messaging's wrong. It might be how we're doing it. So if something doesn't hit, let's work out why it didn't, and then let's do it better next time.
So just to recap, you would suggest to people that just on their way to work, when they get to work, just a simple post, good morning. Just a quick good morning post.
Doesn't even necessarily have to be you talking. It can be something simple, just as specifically like where you are just gonna take a picture of the front of your shop, for example, and literally just write on it, "Good morning, lovely to see the sun's out," or etc. In the following post, you'll go, "Today I'm working on blah, whatever it is."
So talk about upcoming projects, upcoming products. Maybe if it's the middle of August and you're like, actually, I'm prepping now for the winter season, and just give some people some insight into that.
I mean, like for me, it's more. That's what more I would say is the second stage. First stage is something very simple, which is start the process of doing it.
Yeah.
And the rest will just happen, right? Because you'll just through naturally doing it, you'll eventually not think about, oh, I need to write good morning. Because I don't even really write good morning anymore, right?
No.
Now I only really post when I think of an opportunity where I can show the people who care about what I do what I'm doing then at that moment, whether that's I've got a shoot today, or I'm editing all day, I'm filming podcasts all day, I'm doing whatever it may be. That specifically a lot of how the back end of story creation works. And the reason why I mention stories is because I've found it one of the best returns on investment if you can to start with, right? Because it will be the natural change. So like going back to your previous question of what platform should you start with, I would probably say Instagram, unless you are very, very, very heavily looking towards creating an older audience. Then I'd probably say Facebook. But the thing is with Instagram is because it's owned by Facebook, everything you put on Instagram stories, you can instantly forward into your Facebook stories. But that's more business page link stuff. But if you've done that and it's linked, whenever I put something up on my Instagram story, I can automatically share it to my Facebook story. So people who don't necessarily follow my Instagram will be able to see what I'm doing still, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that in regards to how do you go about starting creating content? That's the most simple way, I would say, in firstly seeing what content will work, because what you can also do then is really look at, okay, I'm going to try 4 different ideas and see what gets the best reactions. See what there is an interested in, especially if you're looking to invest in a piece of video but you have no idea what that video is. That's a really good way to then be able to see what could have a lot of merit before spending any money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's building up the steps and the foundations to actually now let's move to the next level of investment. The time, the advice, the creation, and and ultimately what we're talking about is handing over money. Because but it done with the idea of the return on investment to show people the excellence of the product, the excellence of the people behind it, and actually what value that brings to their life. I mean, one of the things I think people, especially if you're a shopkeeper in Salisbury, I think one of the tricks people miss is it's a very high profile tourist location. Just simply tag in Salisbury in a good morning post every day with a picture of what you're doing, whether it be like, oh, just it could literally just be a notebook on your desk with ideas on it, but tag Salisbury, and then anybody who's due to visit who's on Instagram will tag in the location Salisbury and what's going on in Salisbury. What should I go and see? What shouldn't I go and see?
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you have a shop front, and especially if you
Yeah.
are reliant on footfall, because what you have a chance of doing if you do use a location tag in a story is you have a chance to be featured on the Salisbury story post, so the global
Yeah.
story, and also a chance to be featured on the UK one as well, which a lot of
Yeah.
people don't necessarily correlate, because a lot of people just think, oh, if I tag Salisbury, I'm only going to get a chance to go into the Salisbury one. No, you actually have a chance to go into the UK one as well, or even the England one, and etc. Right? Because of how Instagram is set up. By tagging that one place, you're more likely to get into Salisbury, yes, but you also have a chance to get into, specifically. Like, for example, I've had random parts of my story get huge number of views in comparison to everything else just because of one location tag, and I got into like London's location tag, for example, with a random post from my story that it, like, from the actual London story, I got like 50, 60 views. From my actual following, I probably got maybe another 50. Right?
Yeah.
So it was just like, why is it go in the numbers all the way across? Because normally you'll see a correlation going up slowly, right? From the oldest all the way to the newest as it goes down. Why does it suddenly go 45, 50, 150, what? And then 50 again. And that was interesting for me to see. That happened a while ago. But that was interesting for me to see about how sometimes you can randomly strike luck with where you get in location tags, and then how many people are actually viewing that location tag and get that far in the story that day as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And it also doesn't necessarily correlate into everyone who comes into your story will necessarily become a follower or become part of your community. It's more if they do it more consistently. So, say for example, you watch someone's story like 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and you still enjoy their content, then you're probably pretty likely to go into their account, check out some of their stuff on their page. If you're still interested, then you'll probably follow them.
Yeah,
because you've already engaged with that content.
Yeah, for businesses with, like you say, if you've got a shop front or you offer some sort of service that somebody can visit you in Salisbury, that location presence means that anybody visiting, if they check out on Instagram, so whenever I go on holiday, I know what locations I'm going to. I will always type into Instagram the location of the town I'm visiting and see what people are posting up, what businesses are posting. So I start learning what shops I want to visit, what shops are there. Instagram has a map, so I can actually go and find you. And yeah, I just think with Salisbury being such a high-profile tourist town, especially when we reopen, it's such an incredible opportunity. But then I also think that people are missing the online opportunity. Because if you're prepared to just put some time into any of these platforms, you're advertising yourself for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but with that being said, it is hard work, right? It's hard work in the respect to you have to do it consistently for it to work, right? You can't. There is no such thing as I'm going to do 3 posts, I'm magically going to have 1 million followers. No,
absolutely
not. That's not how it works. The only way to grow an account is consistently posting high quality content. That's it. If you want a single sentence on how do you grow your account, consistently post high quality content and engage with your community.
But you said something earlier that I think is really, really important. Once you just start for 3 weeks posting up a picture that says good morning, and you start doing that every day and you're consistent, you then soon start getting comfortable, just learning a little bit more, getting over the I don't like being on camera or whatever. It doesn't have to be a selfie. And then literally, if you're just using Instagram or TikTok, you can easily just in less time than it takes to boil a kettle, you can record a 1-minute video, which you can then, and this is my way of thinking about it, you can then post that 1-minute video every day in the time it takes you to boil a kettle, right? And excuse me. And then when you've built up a following, you've got more curious about curating. That's when somebody like you can come along and just do a bigger video that can go on Instagram TV, can go on a Facebook page. It can be more, 15-minute video broken down into 1-minute segments. It can be so many different things, but somebody's already got 6 months worth of followers, 6 months worth of interest. There's a conversation that can be had where they can discuss with you, well, actually, I seem to have done well going down this road, not so well going down this road, and get greater value for money from you, as well as getting a YouTube presence. It's this, but if people don't start doing it first, they don't learn anything about what people, because really what you're trying to do is learn who's interested in your business. So ultimately, you can provide them some sort of value by selling them the products they want.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. I mean, you're getting to know your customer a lot better, and you're getting to know who that ideal client or ideal customer is to you and your business and your
yeah.
brand. That's
And
part of this process as well.
it is, and it's an opportunity, because also then when you do something like a longer highlight reel, that can be used at a commerce venue. That could be used as an advert. That could be used on Facebook. It could be used on LinkedIn. It could be used on your own website. Everybody, if you've got a business, you've got a website. It could be an amazing created highlight reel, with somebody who's visiting or wants to see. You can just click on it, and they've got 3 minutes of creation. But it's amazing how often people have no presence at all and don't realize. You said something earlier about how advertising space is for a limited amount of time, and you're hoping to get the maximum buck for your money. But a video, whether if you just do it yourself, is there forever. And you can reuse it if you wanted to. You can put it on different platforms, but you get good enough at doing it and learning about your audience, then you can move into that next step of, now I want to get somebody in, especially if you're launching something new.
Yeah.
It's an even better return on your investment.
Or
And
moving
we,
a little bit back to like opening things up again, and that kind of conversation as well.
yeah,
Saying during lockdown, I redid the shop, for example. Here's a virtual tour of the shop, so you know what you expect as a customer. I have already had 1 or 2 inquiries already. Just to give some context, we don't know when we're coming out yet officially. We still don't.
Yeah.
And I've already had 1 or 2 inquiries saying, would this be something you're interested in doing? 1, 2, how much would it charge? 3, it would be great to have done, etc. That kind of thing. In the respect of like virtual tours and virtual showcases, in the respect to showcasing some product, but also showcasing the premises more so, for those people or new customers that they may have picked up from online that don't necessarily know what the shop looks like or feels like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think, like you said, you just said there, like, getting somebody in to do a proper virtual tour, that can go on a website and stay there, forever and a day. And it gives so much visual value, because I can click on any website in Salisbury and of customers, and it might be a picture that's on Google Maps. You might just take me straight to your shop, and I have to trawl through an entire thing. And actually, I'm just trying to find out what you sell, what you do, or and I think of some of because Salisbury has some great kind of spa treatment places, but they're all just photos. There's no sense of the energy or the ambience of the place. Even gyms, there's no sense of scale or perspective. It's just quite often, and no offense to any of these spa owners and no offense to these gym owners, you didn't even use a wide angle lens to give the impression that you had a large premises. And some of them are big, and some of them are small but incredibly cozy. And that's what you want. But if you're in a gym, you want to know you've got space. You don't want to be arguing with the person next to you. you know but if you're in a spa, you actually want it to feel like it's a nice cozy space. And I think a lot of that gets missed. But with a virtual tour, you can really open it up and bring as much of that experience onto the mobile phone somebody's looking into. you know as close as you can get to it without actually being there, you know. And I think a lot of businesses miss that opportunity because, like I said, even if you don't have an online presence, that can sit on your website forever.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
again, I would be careful with how long that sits there because things can get outdated very
but
quick.
for sure,
That's
but it sits there longer than the billboard adverts.
Oh, no, yeah, of course. I mean, there's definitely
Sits there
stuff
longer
that
than the newspaper adverts, which don't give any impression of what that person can experience. And if you're confident in what the person can experience, you know, a virtual tour is a very good idea. And like I said, sorry, just to quickly, because it popped into my head, one of the things I don't think people understand is that if you have a Facebook account, Instagram account, TikTok account, on your profile, you can actually put the details of where you are, how to contact you, where your websites are. You know, just like with Twitter, just like with LinkedIn. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important for businesses that are on the fence or are, especially now, really thinking about, okay, well, I have seen where the weaknesses are in my business. How am I going to remedy those moving out of lockdown and moving out of the situation we find ourselves in? And you know, in most cases, I would probably say if you're looking from an advertising and how people find you and how people, you know, really engage with you as a customer base, I would say that probably most of the answer is going to be what are you doing with advertising and how can you make that better? Is
yeah,
the catch-all kind of answer.
yeah, I think it's going to be interesting when this lockdown is over because a lot of businesses are already failing. Now, a lot of businesses were vulnerable for beforehand, um, and this, but they weren't necessarily. They didn't know they were vulnerable. Nobody could see what was coming. It was an unprecedented event. Some businesses have thrived from it. But if you're one of the businesses that are vulnerable, but you've survived, the reality is, the silver lining is, when you come out of this, you have a really big opportunity to hit the road running, um, because you have survived and you have a really good opportunity to build a strong foundation where anybody around the world can find you. You know, I mean, I said to you, one of the you know, the silver lining for me in this, although there's a lot of uncertainty around jobs, because of the way businesses are now having to run and people want to stay in touch with each other, everybody is learning how to FaceTime, either be it on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Zoom, or Skype. And I only ever really coach on some form of FaceTime format. And it's like the whole world is being trained to how to be coached by me. This is the format that I coach, like you and I are talking now on a podcast. And the rest of the world are getting used to that. And I think this is this thing that will happen for other businesses when they come out of the other end, is it's a great opportunity for them to expand or build stronger foundations or look at different ways to build client bases, customer bases, and bring in different revenue streams.
Mhm.
Because ultimately that's how businesses survive.
Yeah, definitely. And I've done other forms of content a little bit around it, but I'll be doing more. But, I think for me, it's been very interesting to see, okay, which businesses were actually pretty strong on what they were doing, whether they were doing
Yeah.
Instagram lives, whether they were doing Facebook lives, whether they had video content or they had content in general. I think this really highlighted those businesses who understood the value in having an online presence and understood the value in future proofing what they do as well. And something which I've been saying to a lot of my clients is like, okay, that's great that you're in this position and it will shield you a little bit, but I think hopefully this will also mean that a lot of people now really, really, really understand, if they either weren't doing it before, why they should be,
Yeah.
and if they were, why they should be doing it more. Because I think that a lot of people understand now how having, especially if you have an online store where you sell products, if you had a load of promotional content that was already sort of relevant and already sort of made before lockdown, you wouldn't really be sweating it too much about having to promote your website because you've got all this content that you can use to promote what you do, and you can
Yeah.
help it to then bring in revenue from that website. But something that I'm personally developing, and also something which I'm helping clients develop now, is completely outside of people buying from you. What other revenue streams are you putting in place so you are not going to be hit so hard if we have another lockdown, if we have a really hard recession, if we, etc. Because if it wasn't this pandemic, it would have been a recession. If it wasn't that recession, it would have been something else that would have, because there's no way the economy would have continued doing what it was doing, because it's so unsustainable, it's not even funny. And it was just a matter, and it was, it was just a matter of time until we had it down, because we've been going up for too long, right? So from my perspective, I've been looking at going, right, let's ride the wave as long as we can, and then let's have situations ready in place that, so then when it does go down, I'm in a less vulnerable position than I could be if I hadn't done. How am I future-proofing? And sort of by me having content and adapting things like this podcast is ways for me to pivot, and is ways for me to sort of develop still correct content that's still valuable, that will live online, that will eventually bring me revenue.
Well, it's interesting because you're saying about future-proofing. One of the things, which can always be an elephant in the room, that ultimately what we're talking about is revenue. But I think it's trying to highlight to people that everybody wants to consider themselves good value for money. Even Pound Shop considers themselves good value for money. And one of the things about what we're talking about is how you actually demonstrate to people why you should spend your money with me, why you should spend your products with me. And ultimately, from all the conversations we had, it was about, I'm trying to draw people to my services, because my own reviews, my customers say, yeah, he's good value for money. But the point being is, I wasn't giving that message out there for people to see it. I offer a stand, so regardless of what you do for a living, if you have some sort of business that relies on income from people, like you say, you need to future-proof that. And that's about, with digital media, especially when somebody moves up to the next levels and they get you in, it's about highlighting to people why I'm good value for money. When you use my service, you come to my shop, this is what you could expect. And I'm going to use Pound Shop again as a good example, because you don't have to be a £500 an hour service. I'm not £500 an hour, by the way, folks. But but everybody knows a pound shop is a pound. But it sells such a variety of products, and everybody knows it's probably bankrupt stock. It's whatever it is. But it provides an excellent service and value for money. Now, if you're more of a niche market, if you're more of an Etsy shop style thing, you might have some very, very good luxury high-end products, but nobody can see them unless you're in the shop, and nobody knows your shop exists. And so when we're talking about this future-proofing, that's what we're talking about, is building multiple avenues where people can experience what you have, which ultimately lead to sales. I mean, you could be an accountancy service, but an accountancy service can operate anywhere in the world to anybody in the world, depending on the services you offer. There's so many avenues out there that people don't explore. And actually, if you're an accountant in Salisbury, why does not everybody in Salisbury know who you are and where you are? You could, as dull as it might sound, you could just come in every morning and say, good morning, I'm the accountant and this is what I'm doing today. People will then know and learn of your services, and new businesses will learn of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that there's also a way where you can start weaving in, his information, which is not new to me, but will be new to you. This is why, this is, tax law. This is this, that, whatever, And moving briefly back to future-proofing a little bit as well, something which I'm talking to clients about developing now is digital products or digital services that they can provide for a charge that we can sort of like, for example, like an online course would be a key example. If you teach anything, if you make an online course, you can then technically you invest an amount of time in creating the course, right? And in most cases, that information is going to stay relevant for probably 10 to 12 years at least, if not longer. And then what you can do is you can package it up and sell it, and that will sit there generating your revenue once you've done it. Yes, there's a lot of upfront cost in getting it done and then setting it up and etc. But once it's there and it's done, it's going to generate your revenue consistently for years to come. You might have to do some advertising pushes. You might have to remind people that it exists. But there's also ways that you can do that alongside everything else that you're doing. And this is what I mean by having just another thing, that could generate your revenue. Or something simple like, here's an ebook, here's a book, here's whatever, that works well in respect to could bring a lot of value, and also at the end of the day could also bring you more revenue, whether that's direct revenue, e.g. it's a product which you buy, or indirect revenue like what you were talking about as well, which is I'm going to introduce you more to my business and my brand and really showcase a specific product or a specific thing. And then they're more likely, when they're in the mood or in the position to want a video, for example, because of all the content stuff I do, you're more likely to come to me over someone who claims they're a videographer or says they're a videographer but doesn't post videos.
Yes.
Because you have a lot more of a metric of what you're going to expect if you hire me, because I'm consistently showing you, whether that's through stuff I've done for clients or stuff I'm just doing myself.
Sorry to cut you off, because that's exactly what you said to me when we first met, is why, if you're coaching people, why do you not just post everyday coaching stuff? And then there's no confusion. He says, and you pointed out to me, you said, I look at your Instagram account and I don't always know what you're about. And you're not producing any original content, or very limited amount of original content. And he says, so when you do post, you're just posting other people's work. So nobody knows what you're doing and who you are. So of course, now when you go on my Instagram, the only voice you hear is me. And whether so you will know just by checking out my Instagram whether you think I'd be good for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's one of those things where you can see, I saw a post from such and such. I've done this loads of times. I saw this post from Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, today. Here's my thoughts on it. Here's what he said, basically, right? Or I might link to it, depending. But here's what he said, and then here's my take on it. Here's why I think it works. Here how I think you can actually use it, because some of the time, marketers or people who work in media will talk very media. They'll use lots of terms that Bob, who runs a corner shop, is going to have no idea what they mean. So part of what I do as well is I can explain firstly why it works, and then I can say, well, this is the terminology, but this is actually what it means in layman's terms. And I think that from a growth perspective, if you can actually explain why your service and product works well in long form, and you can actually explain again and again and again and again and again why people should be buying whatever it is, how is it beneficial, right? For example, if you're a florist, how is me buying flowers from you beneficial, right? Oh, it really makes your house smell nice, or it really lightens up someone's day, or whatever it may be. If you can't talk at pretty long length about what you are trying to sell, about why you should technically buy it, then it's a bit questionable whether then you shouldn't be questioning why people aren't buying from you, if that makes sense. Because you're not doing a good enough job at explaining why it's valuable to people, or to business, or to whoever your target market is. So that customer, that client, that etc. In my case, client, and etc.
No, I agree, because if you, I mean, this podcast is a good example. Last week's one was a good example. There's large moments where, you know, you've just spoken and I've just sat here and listened. So you clearly know your industry, you know what you're talking about. And I think that sometimes people fear that as well. And if I was going to offer, oh yeah, I'll come back to that. If I was going to offer any advice to somebody, it was going to be, actually, rather than worry sometimes about, especially if you're going to start filming, rather than worry sometimes about what to say, just focus on what you know. Because I think sometimes people become fearful and trip over, and this is the coach talking, become fearful and trip over themselves about what they don't know. Well, actually, you're trying to promote what you do know. But just while I think about it, we mentioned earlier, or you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, um, about helping bridge people between the knowledge and stuff. But you used a phrase earlier that I meant to ask you, but I didn't want to interrupt you. ISP. What's ISP?
So ISP is your unique selling point, right?
Okay.
So it's what specifically. So for example, one of mine is how personal I am with each client and
Yeah.
how personal I am with their business.
Yeah.
Another maybe how valuable you are, in the respect to your value for money. For example, you mentioned Poundland earlier. One of their unique selling points is how cheap they are in comparison to what you get, right?
Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, the best thing. I mean, Poundland is probably one of the world's greatest examples, because, and it used to be a very popular joke, kind of, off the cuff sort of dad type joke, because everything in there is a pound. How much was that? It was a pound. How much was that?
that was a quid. Oh, that was a
Pound.
quid.
Yeah, pound.
Yeah.
So nobody ever walks into Poundland wondering how much something's going to cost. If it's on the shelf, it's a quid. It's a pound. It's 100 pence. It's that simple. If you have a pound in your pocket, you can go into Poundland and buy something. There's nothing else in there, you know. And it's not like when you walk into a shop and you start looking for labels. Oh, how much does this cost? What's the price tag? What's the price tag? Poundland alleviated all of that stress, all of that concern, just with their name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then it was followed up by the 99p store and etc. And it's just
Yeah.
etc. like that. And I think it depends on what industry and what you're in, what your ISP is. But
Yeah.
ideally, I would say you should probably have multiple if you can. For example, as I say, one of mine is how personal I am with each client. I tailor my entire packages around what is it going to do for your business and why, right?
Yeah.
So, if I think that doing 4 videos on a topic is better, we'll do 4 videos, right? Or if I think
Yeah.
one more in-depth video is better, then we'll do one more in-depth video. As well, I think in a different way, I also have said that, or some clients have said to me that I also have value for money in a different way, in the respect to, in comparison to what you get, right? In the amount of information, the amount of knowledge, the amount of work that I actually put in comparison to what you're paying, is huge, right? In the respect of the value which I add.
Yeah, I think one of the things that added massive unexpected value is the conversations, because when you and I started talking, I had to explore and explain. So I had, by explaining to you what I was trying to do and why I was doing it, I was having to explore those values for myself, which ultimately were the values of the brand that I am, and why that was important to me, and what that was, and why I was doing it. And the flip side of that was, then when I'm talking to customers, I'm kind of much more in touch with what it means to me and why I do it, and how I can pass that over to the person, because ultimately I'm trying to coach people to overcome anxiety, to become a high status person, to pick up, get them to understand the value of their daily routines and habits. But it was
And again, that's what
interesting.
I mean, where I say that if you as a business person cannot sit there and solo sell me what your product
Yeah.
is, then I can't help you,
But
because all I'm going to do is amplify your voice. That's all I'm doing with video,
Mm.
is I'm making your voice see more people. But if what you are saying isn't very good, I still can't make that good. If that makes
No,
sense,
but
right?
the way that you and I really got down, 'cause I think you remember the first time, or no, the second time we met, and I turned up with a notebook and an A4 pad, and we sort of went through pages and pages of just questions. And I remember turning up with questions, and you and I then went off, and there was homework and stuff like that. And it really made me get in touch with not only my brand, but why it was important to me. And so that, just going back to something you said, that was the unexpected value. It was much more than just digital content. There was, it actually kind of took me back to the foundations of what I do and why I do it, which was, and actually up until then, sometimes, and I think all businesses can be affected by this, is you sometimes lose touch with why you do it, how you got into it, and why it's important to you. You know, and it made me reinvest in that. So ultimately, long term, I became happier about why I was doing it again, and
And
kind
I
of
think
got that
it's
spring in my step again, if that makes sense.
Mm. I think it's also very important from a business perspective that you also consistently revisit, why am I doing what I'm doing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because then you'll find out, and then you'll see. Like, there might be a day where I wake up and I don't want to do video anymore,
yeah. Of course, there is. Yeah,
right? I go, done what I want to do with video, done what I do want to do here. But this is what I'm really passionate about. And by me going back consistently to, why am I doing this? Am I still feeling this way? Am I still getting really excited? Am I still getting really happy about what I do? Am I consistently pushing myself? For me, like a lot of people said, oh, how did you build and how did you do this? I said, for the first year, I'm just going to just do stuff, see how it goes. Then, by the time I asked myself at a year in, I went, do I still get excited about this? Do I still want to do this? Do I still enjoy doing this? And I said, well, yeah, I'm actually more excited, and I actually want to do it more, and I'm actually more passionate than I was
yeah,
at the start.
Mm,
So
yeah,
I think that for me, it's become sort of the deeper I go into this and the more I learn about it, the more I want to do it.
yeah,
Right. And I think that's really good. And I think that's really exciting, because I think that way you're constantly wanting to develop, and it doesn't necessarily feel like work in the same way. Because for me, the amount of growth that I have or have had, not even necessarily like monetarily or follower wise, but just simply personal from what I'm doing, is invaluable, because it's given me a mindset of, I now in most cases go into a situation where there's a problem and go, right, okay, I'm not going to see this as a barrier. I'm going to see this as an opportunity to work out a way through this problem, whatever that problem may be. And that's simply because of me problem solving in jobs, in video production,
yeah,
in this and that. And the same with like this whole lockdown situation. For a while, it knocked me to the floor, but I was like, right, okay, we're now going to get up, we're going to realign and go again, right? And that way, I've said, well, look, where were my weaknesses? Where were my inefficiencies? How do I then re-efficient what I'm doing? And also, what other strategies can I, or what other things can I do to eventually bring in me more revenue? What other content? What not even necessarily revenue, but I've said this before as well. It's like, how else can I add value to businesses? How else
yeah,
can I add value to my clients? Because for me, that's more important, right? Because if I add humongous levels of value, you're more likely, and I'll build a relationship with that business owner. So then they won't even think about going somewhere else.
no,
Because why?
no,
Because
yeah,
why would they? It's not like, oh, I'm loyal to Colton because he's nice. No, I'm loyal to Colton because he gives me so much more than just shooting a video,
yeah,
or etc. In that respect, he quote unquote handholds me, or a testimonial which I was really touched to read when I first got it was, Colton makes it effortless to create content,
yeah, nice.
which I
Well,
was like, do I?
yeah,
Great. I mean, that's the end goal. And now, it's been something that I sort of said and went, okay, if they've said that, how can I really make it effortless? right? What structures and things can I put in place that from me? So I'm just going through a step by step process to help that client really understand. Firstly, what are we going to create? Then how are we going to create it? Then how are we going to deliver it?
Right. That's good. And we're just about up to time.
Indeed.
We've both got. I've got a meeting at 12, and you've got another podcast to do.
Indeed. Is there anything else you want to ask me, mention, go over today before we end this podcast?
Yes and no. No, there's always things that you and I get into. I think, like I said, I think it was important because when we spoke last week on the last podcast, it kind of went down such a coaching line that wasn't what you and I was expecting. We were just actually going to have a podcast chat, and it kind of, for want of a better term, got a little bit hijacked by kind of the coaching agenda and why coaching important is what we're doing. And we never actually got onto, oh, actually, this is what you do, and this is why you do it, and this is how it adds value. And really, and one of the things you and I, when we're not podcasting, but just actually talking to each other, talk about is for the businesses that all come out of this and all of these people that survive, how are they, planning for their future? How are they making their futures bulletproof? How are they best serving themselves? Ultimately, the best way to take care of your customers is to take care of your business. And although sometimes it can seem like a dirty word or dirty words, it's all about revenue stream. Because without revenue stream, your business doesn't exist. If your business doesn't exist, your existing customers have to go somewhere else, and they've lost the value that had them there in the first place. Every business out there knows they have a loyal customer base, a loyal customer who continually buys their service, whatever that product may be. And there's a responsibility to ensure you stay around for them, but also the opportunity to explore how you can offer that value that they receive that makes them so loyal. How do you give that to other people? And you and I can only do that from our perspectives, and that's what we never got into, which I think we've managed to do a lot better today, is talk about how you as a brand with video content, why the internet is so important and why social media platforms are so important. But actually as well, I think if you're a young person out there right now who's thinking about starting up a business or has dreams or ideas of starting up a business, I think a podcast like this is really, really useful. And just as a little caveat, if you do have any questions, contact Carlton. He'll love it. He really actually will love helping you. So, do what he did to me. Contact him for a coffee, and vice versa. By the way, if somebody ever wanted to just reach out and ask me a question, please do. I'm sure Carlton will put the links in. But for businesses and people out there, I think it's, as a community for Salisbury, it's a really important time for us to try and help each other. And
yeah,
just
definitely.
explain to people the importance of digital content is a good way to do that. It's what you can give. It is what you can do for people.
Yeah, and I think that we'll end on this, but I think that what a lot of people, because you mentioned I really like answering questions, and that for me is more because then I get to I get to explore and explain things that I necessarily don't know, and if I don't know, I'll say I don't know, but then I'll say, right, okay, and then in my head I'm like, right, okay, next time I ask that question, you're gonna know the answer, right? So for me, why do I get excited about answering questions? One, I love talking about this, right? I can talk about this to the end of time. One, two, it also allows me to really fine tune what do I know well and what don't I know well as well.
Yes.
And as I say, the only way to know that, and that's why I say to a lot of people who do preach you should do X, Y, and Z, you should be able to talk at long length and answer any question you are possibly asked about it. And if you can't, there's a hole, fill it.
Yeah.
Right? The information is out there, you just got to find it. There's quicker ways and, better ways to necessarily go about doing that, depending on if you want to spend money or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool.
So yeah. Thanks for coming on, Dave. Thanks for hijacking this podcast. I'm going to hijack it back.
Yeah, thank you very much for the privilege of the steering wheel for an hour and a half. It's been fun.
That's all right. It's been it's been interesting, and I'm sure this will be a more, thing we do more of. Topics emerge and updates emerge, and possibly even moving after lockdown as well, because I'm definitely enjoying doing podcasting. I think there's a lot of value in doing podcasting as well. So from my perspective, as I told you before we started, I'm planning to continue for the long haul in this respect to produce more podcasts and stuff. So
cool. That's good. It's good. It's a lot of fun. So, and actually, if there is a business out there that would like to appear on Carlton's podcast, get in touch with them.
And I'm sure there will be. As I say, I mean, it's not necessarily an open invite to everyone, but it also is in the same way. There has to be a content that can be spoken about in long format. It's not an advertising space. It's about an opportunity to tell people why you're passionate about the business you have. Yeah, I mean, you'll get passive advertising through it. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily a space where I'm here just to sell you. That will be something that will eventually happen, but it's more of, let's have an in-depth discussion on a topic which there's crossover with, or let's introduce what you do and why it's valuable to the collective group of whoever and however.
I don't know why it pops into my head, but if there's any local river keepers out there, I'd love to hear about the work you do on things like the River Avon. Yeah, but they do some amazing. I know, but it popped in my head, so I'm going to go with it. You know what I mean? That would be a really interesting conversation, because they do some amazing work.
Sure, I will be intrigued in some ways. It's something I was just like, what? How does this jump into your head? But okay, fair enough.
I don't know. I just go with them when they do, because the river keepers, and from a conservation point of view, and what they do with the waterways. Because Salisbury is called Five Rivers for a reason, because of all the 5 rivers and the junctions, and how they traditionally used to manage the flood fields. There's an incredible history behind it, and a lot of the river keepers will be aware of that history and will have a good knowledge of it, and why it's important to maintain the rivers in the Salisbury area.
So I hope you guys did enjoy that episode. So thanks again to Dave, if he is listening to this podcast, which I imagine he will be, and hopefully got to the end and enjoyed re-listening to his interview. But those of you who have been listening, thank you ever so much for getting to the end of this video or this podcast. I hope you, as I said at the intro, found value in it and really, really enjoyed the podcast. Now, I've got a very special episode coming next week with a local business owner in Salisbury. I'm not going to actually specify who just as of yet, because I wanted to be a little bit mysterious. But as I said, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I hope you come back next week, and we're going to be putting these out ideally every single Monday, unless I have a technical difficulty in the respect to what slows down the production side of these podcasts, but I am trying to get ahead on the production side as well. So thank you guys for watching once again. If you are new, as I said in the beginning, it would be great if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, it really, really helps the channel grow, and I would appreciate any feedback in the comment section down below as well, along with any topics and any other suggestions to who I should reach out to see if they would be interested in coming on to the podcast and talking about what they do and who they are. So thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next week. I've got some